All right, welcome everyone to the Solana Community Validator discussion, February 5th, 2024. Agenda today, where we've got some validator updates, including a postmortem of the outage. Some of you just saw Rex is a new DevRel for Anza, and give him a chance to introduce himself. Talk a little bit about validator educational workshops, and finally have a discussion about governance and timely vote credits. So diving in. The latest validator updates, 1.17.22 is now recommended for all mainnet beta operators. If you are on .21, you can remain on .21, but 1.17.22 is recommended generally. All operators should upgrade as soon as possible, including RPC fleets. So if you manage any RPC infrastructure, please update to 1.17.22 as soon as you can. And if any of you missed this, there was a postmortem of the outage on the 6th. The details are in here. Make sure everyone can see that. Sorry, I can't see my screen. Can everyone see the other tab of the? No. Okay. Did I lose screen share? Have people seen my screen at all?
I can see it.
Oh, can now.
Yep. Okay, cool. Sorry. All right. Yeah, back to the slide. 1.17.22, I already mentioned, is recommended. All operators should upgrade, and there's a postmortem available. So the postmortem is here on Solana.com. I'll send the link out in the chat as well. The sort of TLDR is down here at the bottom. Essentially, the issue is in the compilation of programs on chain. You could read more details if you like in here, but it gives kind of the breakdown of what happened. Any questions about the outage or the updates for mainnet? Just going to go through the comments real quick. Yeah, okay, looks about Leisure Live. Cool, moving on. There's no questions. For testnet, 1.18.2 is now recommended. I think delinquency is a bit high on testnet, so just be aware. Don't restart if we have over 8% delinquency. But otherwise, that is the recommended version. Go ahead, Zentetsu.
I asked you a question in DM on Discord that I would not like to publicly disclose. Can you just take a quick look at it? If you don't want to answer it, if you do want to answer it, that's fine too.
Yeah. Unknown at this point. I'll just leave it at that for now. Yeah. Okay. Moving on there. And any questions about testnet? Rex. So Rex St. John is the new developer relations lead for the Anza team working on core engineering at Anza. His Discord handle is Infamous Iron Chef here, and I'll let him intro himself.
Hello. So yeah, I was in the Cosmos ecosystem before. I was working at a company called Saga. So prior to that, I was doing semiconductors for the last 10 years. I live in Seattle and really looking forward to hopefully meeting some or all of you in person. As I mentioned, I'm going to be probably in the Solana booth at ETH Denver and maybe at some of the side events upcoming. So it would be great to connect with all of you. My Twitter handle is REXSTJOHN and my email is rex.stjohn@anza.xyz. So feel free to get in touch. Thanks a lot. Yeah, Solana booth at ETH, that's dangerous. I may not survive.
If you can put any of those in the chat, that'd be helpful.
Yeah.
The contact info. And yeah, Solana is going to ETH Denver.
I'm curious to hear Rex's backstory on the infamous Iron Chef handle. Is there a good story there?
My story is that I lost my prior Discord handle. So I reached back to my Counter-Strike college handle. So it's infamous Iron Chef is what I played in college in Counter-Strike. So
Yeah, all right, cool. Thank you.
Right. Let me share screen again. Okay. Quick note about the Validator educational workshops. Next one will be February 21st, 2024. So 6 days away. A potential topic that Chris from Chainflow suggested was discussion about failover setups. We've done a discussion about having a hot second validator before, but I think this was more sort of focused at what your failover setup looks like. How do you come back from, restart or downtime? More of a discussion than necessarily like a kind of lecture style. So that might be what we do, unless someone else has other topics. But happy to get any feedback. Sort of curious if this is something that people would be interested in. Any validators out there that would attend this or think it would be useful to them. Absolutely. Okay, cool. Got a quorum of 2. That's good enough. So yeah, pending any other ideas, I think that will be the topic. We'll do that again on the 21st, 1800 UTC. I'll post an announcement about it in Discord shortly too. For anybody who wants to look at past workshops, they're here in this YouTube playlist. I'll put it in chat as well. Okay. Yeah, now moving on to a different topic, timely vote credits and governance. So there's been a bit of chatter in the Solana Staking Alliance Discord, as well as in the Solana Tech Discord, about the timely vote credits change. For a little bit of background, this is the SIMD for timely vote credits, SIMD 33. I'll put this in the chat. And here we go. This SIMD is currently slated for activation in V118, but it is under the do not activate held section because of some sort of concerns about governance and how we should activate this feature. So the reason we are talking about it and bringing it up is that I think there's just some uncertainty about when we should activate it and how, and what does governance really mean in this case. So I'll kind of hand it off to Zentetsu to talk a bit about this if you'd like, and anyone else who wants to discuss sort of where we're at in the governance process.
Oh, sorry, on the spot. I didn't realize we were going to talk about this. Okay. Well, it was proposed. It's an issue that I identified. Maybe other people had identified it also, but at least I spoke about it publicly maybe a year and a half ago or so. I created the proposal before there was a SIMD process. I put it in the proposed issues area. I made a website where I started tracking what I expected the changes would look like in terms of how they would apply to validators. And then we had some validator discussion about that in this very meeting a year and a half ago, and talked about those numbers and talked about concerns. And I continued to gather that data for a long time and post it. Eventually, it became a SIMD, and then it became an implementation. I got a lot of support from Solana Labs on getting that implementation correct. It's behind there are 2 separate changes with 2 separate feature flags. One is structural and enables timely vote credits by changing vote accounts so that they can track new data that's needed to track latencies, which are then needed to determine vote credits based upon timeliness of votes. And the second feature actually enables that accounting. The first feature is the risky one. That's the one that actually modifies on-chain data and can break vote accounts if there was a problem with the change and break the whole change. That feature has already been enabled on testnet and shown to not have any adverse effects there. The second change would enable actually changing how validators and stake accounts are paid out based upon how they actually voted and the credits earned under the new scheme. That's not a consensus change. It's often talked about as being a consensus change. It doesn't affect how votes count. It just affects how validators are paid or stake accounts are paid. So that's basically the overview of how the changes are structured. The purpose of it is to try to prevent certain kinds of rule bending that has been occurring where validators can intentionally vote slowly for the purposes of avoiding voting on slots that aren't going to be confirmed. Because when you vote on a slot that's on a fork that doesn't get confirmed, you get locked out from some amount of future votes and lose the potential to earn credits on those votes. There's one validator in particular that's the poster child of this. That's the one we call VIMD, because I think their validator identity starts with VIMD, and they used to use that as their name and have a little icon. Now they've switched to just being called private. They've been doing this kind of voting for 2 years now and have almost never voted in a way that contributes to consensus, because they delay their votes to the point that they earn very high credits, but they almost never vote before a slot is confirmed already. That's kind of the poster child reasoning behind having a change like this, because there's nothing to prevent private validators from doing this. If they have no reputation to uphold, there's no reason they can't completely maximize their vote credits and completely minimize their contribution to consensus. And one validator has proven this out. Luckily, other private validators haven't followed in VIMD's footsteps, but a lot of public validators, myself included, have modifications that play a little bit on the edges of this. And we also would be affected by this change. It will actually reduce the effectiveness of those mods, because it will make the extra credits that are earned as these mods be worth a little bit less than they would be otherwise. Another effect of this is that it's going to change the spread of vote credits, I think, pretty drastically. Right now, most people are clustered in a very narrow range of vote credits, except for the modded validators and the laggers that do really badly. Maybe they have bad setups and they aren't voting very frequently. But most people are in a very narrow range. I expect this change will kind of spread that out a little bit, because it will make it much more fine-grained how many credits you earn based upon more subtle aspects of how well you're voting. I think also that it will condense the credits earned and take some of that earned by the modded validators and redistribute those credits kind of back to everyone else, which is another way of saying that it reduces the effectiveness of the modded validators. That's the general overall sort of landscape that I expect to see happening after this, if this change were enabled. But there could be a lot of unknowns, and I think a lot of people are rightfully concerned about such a potentially drastic change in how rewards are distributed and what effect that would have on the validator set. My intention and goal was that it would be a positive change that would encourage better performance and reward those validators who are voting really in a high performance mode, that they're voting quickly and not delaying unnecessarily. But I think the best scenario is that we enable this on testnet and then actually see what happens, demonstrated, and then we can have a vote and decide how well we expect it to work on mainnet and whether we want to support it. Is there any questions about that? Is that a good enough overview?
I think that's a great summary. I think a lot of the discussion going on right now in Discord, and I think would be useful to have now too, is sort of the process to get that over the line, what the governance looks like, and what's Malay, I think you're unmuted. Thank you. What process gets that over the line, and sort of mechanically how that works?
Do we have this on a branch that we could actually deploy to testnet?
Yeah, so there's a feature activation right now that's deployed on testnet, or sorry, I should say, there is code on testnet with the feature, and it needs to be activated.
Yeah, the code is in 118.
So
anybody running 18 has the code. Most everyone on testnet is running 118 and therefore does have it. It's just not enabled because the first feature is enabled on testnet. So all the vote accounts upgraded in place and changed their size and made room to account for the new latency information, and it all happened seamlessly. But the second change that would actually enable the difference in accounting method to be used to determine how to actually assign vote credits and then affect, staking payouts, that change has not been enabled on testnet. And anybody who runs 118 on mainnet will also be running the code. Neither of those features are enabled on mainnet. So that's where it is.
Right. Okay, great. So activate the feature on testnet. If testnet blows up, well, it's only testnet. We learned something and then try again. So, okay.
Yeah, Michael, go ahead.
I just want to confirm and that this change has been audited as well, externally?
Yes.
By one auditor, and which auditor?
I'd have to confirm with Will. I think he's currently traveling, but I know it was audited. some nice work. Yeah, so I guess the
Where
next
I
thing.
think,
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
sorry, some concern may lie is in a lot of external tooling that reads vote credits out of vote accounts or displays them on websites. They're going to get, like, the current maximum is 432,000. That would be the maximum credits you can earn. The new maximum is going to go up to 8 times that. So it's going to be like 3 million. So there's actually an extra sort of like digit needed to represent. So who knows if the command line client is going to clip that? I don't know. I mean, we'll find out little issues like that and in terms of how this data is ingested off chain and used in places where there might be things that need to be fixed. That's another thing that I think enabling on testnet will help with.
Do we want to have the discussion here going on in Vote TVC about how we're going to do the vote, or do you feel like that's premature?
That'd be great to have Michael Hubbard step in on that, since he's been doing a great job leading the charge on trying to get all of that organized.
Yeah, I can quickly summarize kind of where I think the thinking is. So there's a new channel that was created on the Solana Tech Discord just to try and keep the conversation more central, simultaneously further fragmenting kind of governance conversation. But so there's a new channel called Vote-TVC, which is specifically for this feature. And so the overall thinking at the moment is it's partially activated on testnet. Generally, there seems to be broad consensus in favor of this feature. And there tends to be consensus that it requires governance to activate. So we are not in a position to have an on-chain governance vote that will directly trigger the activation of the feature. That's not the goal here. The goal is that 2 things happen simultaneously. We activate the feature fully on testnet, verify that everything's working, let it run for multiple weeks at least. In parallel, we have a conversation to try and determine under what parameters the community generally agrees a governance vote should take place. So specifically, we're trying to decide what kind of participation should we need, do we need, what should be the threshold for it passing, and what kind of time frame are we looking at for that, and how do we set this up? So that's kind of the conversation happening now. And broadly speaking, those are the questions we want to answer. So, what is the threshold for it to pass? How many people should participate, or do we keep that question open, which some people are suggesting, which I think is also potentially feasible? And then kind of what timeline are we looking at? So one idea is to say like epoch 580, which is in about 10 days roughly. That's when we take a snapshot of all the stake weights on chain. And then we spend like that epoch basically verifying that we have the correct numbers. We somehow everyone can kind of validate that, okay, this is the correct distribution of stake. And we basically follow the advisory vote process that we had in October. So tokens will be minted and distributed to all validators. And we'll have to try and find a way to make that as trustworthy as possible as well. And then we have a voting period. So then you basically send those tokens to one of 3 addresses for yes, no, or abstain. And that voting period, we have to kind of debate how long that should be. Again, my suggestion is 10 epochs, which is around 20 days. Kind of the last vote was about 10, 12 days. And a lot of people said they weren't aware of it. So I think like 20 days will make sure that we have enough time to communicate this repeatedly and get engagement out. So it's definitely going to be a communication campaign to try and get a lot of engagement on this matter. And ultimately, if we have low participation, I would frame the vote as kind of a veto vote. So it's not more of a question is there substantial objection? And if not, then we can consider this kind of approved. But that's an outline of kind of where the thinking is, but we want more voices to come in and say, yes, that's good, or no, we think it should be this way. This is a concern, stuff like that. So join the channel, please jump in the chat there. And I think Zan is going to try and put together a bit more reading and research and maybe a simulator that people can use to see how this change would have affected them in past epochs and understand a bit better what it is. And all of that should go into this, and it has to happen before we start the vote. Any questions?
Well, if I mean, some of the chat discussion is pointing out that Brian Long led the vote for the incredibly important inflation feature. So if he has any insights or, memory of how that process went and what worked well and what didn't, that would be great to know.
It sounds like my memory was faulty there.
Yeah.
Sorry about that. Brian was with us from the very beginning, and I know was actively engaged when the community did the inflation vote. The process at the time was much, I think, certainly much less mature than it is now. It was also like the final switch to enable validators to be self-sufficient on Solana. So it was like pretty much universally supported, but it was still a significant change to the functioning of the economics of the network at the time, which was still in its early stages. We launched mainnet in March of 2020, and 11 months later, in February of 21, inflation was enabled. The process at the time, and potentially like the on-chain part might look similar today. It was that basically like a PR was made against the code base, which referenced a certain pub key, which was sort of like a proto version of the feature activation program that we have now. And that PR, I think, I thought it was submitted by Brian. Clearly it was not. It was pushed by a community member, and it was associated with the pub key of a basically an SPL wallet, or a wallet containing SPL tokens, which were then automatically distributed to every validator based on stake weight. And this was all done in the CLI tools at the time, because Realms didn't exist, Squads didn't exist, all these beautiful tools we have now. And basically validators would either, they receive the tokens based on stake weight, and then they would send the tokens to, some pre-designated wallet indicating their assent to the vote. As Michael has observed, like even now, like there wasn't, at the time, it was either you vote in support or you basically abstain, right? There wasn't a no vote or a veto vote option at the time. Like there's much better tooling and things for this now. But that's sort of how that flow went at the time.
Yeah, thanks, Dan. I just want to quickly add to that. So we're actually using pretty much the same tool, and that's how we did the advisory vote. The only difference is that there's no on-chain feature gate. So it's kind of a dummy feature gate that's created just to do the token distribution. And then getting around the kind of assent or nothing thing is by just creating 3 different random pub keys and specifying send it here for yes, here for no. And then we tally it manually. So the tally and feature activation part are not included in this process, but broadly we're actually using the exact same tooling.
But there is a desire that I've seen in the governance Discord to have a more robust system, something that can basically handle the changing stake weight over time, possibly for stakers to express their sort of voting interest by potentially being able to change who they stake with depending on how people vote. But like all that has to be discussed. I'm not saying that's how it's going to be, but I think there's a lot of desire to make a mature system that will be able to handle maybe significantly more controversial votes and in ways for us to get more insight into that in a more trusted system.
Yeah, I want to add to that. I talked to Josie. Sorry, Dr. Were you there?
No, go ahead.
I talked to Josie from the Onza team, who's been working on feature activations and thinking about how we do that in the multi-client world. So he's very interested in this topic and can help out with a vote program as well, specifically for governance like this. So I think he's interested in writing a proposal and getting feedback from the community, seeing kind of what makes sense to build.
We should make sure we get him in the governance chats. I think it's probably going to be similar to the kind of governance of like which version, like what, like even the non-controversial just features that do have to happen, that would normally be handled just by Anza, but will now have to be decided across clients. There's probably going to be a lot of similar parallels in that system as you might in like more of a governance or a validator-led like governance decision, like around economics or things that the validators would like to be involved in the decisions.
Yeah. I think the idea is to build something that is not for feature activation necessarily, just specifically for governance for validators. So I'll make sure he's included in those channels, but he would be a good person and resource for implementation. Yeah, Andrew.
Andrew.
Sorry.
Can I just jump in very quickly? I just want to add that there's one major flaw with the current process, and I say current because it's not really the current process, but what we're doing. And the same applied to inflation, which is that the token distribution is completely subjective or subject to the individual that is activating this whole process. So, the CLI tool creates a CSV file for distribution, but that could be modified before pressing the button to actually distribute the tokens by stake weight. So we need to find a way to try and make that as trusted as possible, but it's definitely not a long-term solution.
I was just gonna, I know we're sort of nearing the end here, but stepping back just a brief moment, I think like this is a really impressive feat for the community and for the protocol as a whole, and something I'd like to see as we think about like governance as an initiative across Solana is more marketing and communications around this. I think something that like no one sees but is really impressive is something that we should like really sort of echo throughout the chambers of crypto Twitter and broader crypto communities, because I just think it's like a really important thing to like double down, triple down, quadruple down on. Like this is the stuff that makes crypto special. So congrats to everyone that's like really pushing this forward.
Yeah, it's been a team effort. I mean, I did some of the initial pushing, but other people have definitely picked up the banner. People both inside Solana Labs, inside the foundation, and in the community. So I think it's definitely a team effort.
Team effort, team win, and we should just like echo it as loud as we can.
It's a win when we get 60% quorum on this, but we definitely need.
We should talk about it
foundation.
beforehand. We can get there. We should just talk about it beforehand as well.
Yeah, we need foundation for sure to make a lot of noise around this.
I think we're bigger than the foundation at this point. We can talk for ourselves.
You've been bigger than the foundation for a while in terms of head count. So one other thing that maybe is worth discussing is the timing of the vote. Michael mentioned a specific epoch, but I think there was also some discussion of doing it after it's activated on testnet. There are opinions there.
Chris is of the call. He said he couldn't speak. He has a different opinion to me, but I'm going to try and quickly represent it, which is that he says it should be fully tested out on testnet first before we initiate a vote. Chris, can you speak? I just see you pop up here.
Yeah, you guys hear me? Yeah, okay. Yeah, in my perspective is that we should test on testnet, or at least give it a weekly run of testing before initiating the vote. I think that's the summary. Basically, initiate the vote once we decided whether or not this is going to break anything, then initiate the vote at that time, as opposed to initiating the mainnet vote while we're waiting for the testing period on testnet. So that's right.
Yeah.
So to do it in series instead of parallel.
Chris, I'm going to summarize real quick and correct me if I'm wrong. It was pretty hard to hear you, but it sounded like you said your desire is to test on testnet first, to activate it there, make sure there's no technical problems, everything's working well, and then initiate the vote on mainnet, or initiate the vote for mainnet once testnet is tested. Is that correct? Yes. Okay, great.
And I agree with that, and I think it makes sense because I mean, the more uncertainties can be nailed down before a vote, the better. Because we want people to be voting on issues that they can really make judgments about, not uncertainties about is it even going to work. And I think having evidence that it is going to work and that it does what we expect and that it doesn't break things we don't expect is very important to have before a formal vote. Because if I was voting for this and I didn't know what it would actually do, whether it would even work, I'd feel very, very hesitant to vote for it. But if it's been proven out in at least a testing environment, I think that's very important. And that's not just the only way. If there are other ways in which people can think of validating or verifying, let's hear them, because I'd like to have those done also before a vote.
One other related topic, there's been some desire, I think, internally from engineers to also run a vote on testnet before activating. What are people's thoughts on that?
I don't think that makes sense. There's no kind of organic stake distribution on testnet or very interested validators. It's just kind of delegation participants who will just do what Foundation tells them, more or less. Totally different kind of interests. So I'm not sure what that vote would achieve.
Could there be a bounty to like try and break the thing? I know there's always bounties, but I think that could be more valuable than like a vote on testnet.
Yeah, I mean, there is the bug bounty, and this would definitely apply to the bug bounty if someone were to find an issue.
Well,
Oh
yeah, go ahead.
No, go ahead, Andrew. I'll go after you.
I was just going to ask, would they receive the bounty even if they found the bug on testnet? Like, I think it's worthwhile to like test this thing out on testnet. And I don't know what the bug bounty. I thought it only applied to mainnet. Maybe that's just my error.
No, I'd have to double check, but I'm fairly certain that any code in a release, if you find it, the bug bounty applies.
Yeah, we wouldn't
Once
want people just finding bugs that are already on mainnet. That would be unfortunate.
Yeah, that would be. That's smart. Maybe marketing then is like the biggest initiative, just telling people that there is a bug bounty that they don't know about.
Yeah, and on testnet, I think we would want to take some time to actually test this thing in different ways as well. You set up a validator in Australia, one in New Zealand, one in Peru or Argentina, and let's just make sure that the latencies from the southern hemisphere are actually okay. And we're assuming they are, but let's not assume, right? Let's know that they're going to be okay. So a little time to soak it on testnet with some creative testing strategies will be helpful before we get to mainnet.
I just want to add one more point on this note, is that my thinking with doing it in parallel was in the interest of time, because the governance process could potentially take, if we're talking 5 + 10 epochs, we're looking at end of March, early April for results. And I know around April is when we're also going to see 118 on mainnet, which means that this could potentially be activated at that point. We don't know how long it would take to activate on testnet and then fully vet and validate. So my thinking was we could do it in parallel, and the proposal would be include text that it is subject to, testing on testnet and engineers being happy with it and all that. Because remember, again, the vote is just saying, yes, we're happy with this. The actual activation of the feature could be 6 months later, whatever, based on ANSA engineer's decision. But I also see the point about people not being comfortable voting for it until it's been tested. But I just want to add that caveat about kind of the timing being another factor.
I guess at the end of the day, right, this is an expression that says if this feature were to work as expected and intended with the, like the result, this is, like a net benefit to the way that this, fundamental calculation of validator vote credits work. And, assuming that we are in support as a validator community, that this should be, like turned on, rather than as the code exists today, the expression would probably, just to align with you, Michael, on that. I think that's more what the vote says. And then you can get that expression, and then, whether the switch gets flipped on is, up to that process.
I mean, and there will be winners and losers. Just let's be aware of that. Like, some people will increase their APY and some people will decrease their APY as a result of this. It's not just a win for everybody. For example, Andrew's on the call to Coinbase, right? Both of Coinbase validators, I think, will earn, somewhat less API as a result of this. Hopefully, we can figure out the reason for that and find ways to, give validators an opportunity to improve and not just make it a random hit to people that are like, innocent bystanders. Like, that's my hope. But there will be some broken eggs. Like, you can't make this omelet without it. Like, I think people need to be ready for that. And sorry, I didn't mean to call you out, but they are two of the biggest ones that I think will be affected in this way. So that's why I said it.
Yeah, I'm not super concerned, to be honest. We don't run any modifications, but yeah, we'll definitely look into anything that we can change or adjust to make it better.
All right, anything else people want to raise, either about this topic or others? There's a little discussion in the chat about having separate test nets. I echo Blake's sentiment that just starting another test net is not a simple process and will require a lot of maintenance and thinking about how to do that.
Yeah, and then we'll have to think through that process too, like with multiple clients. I mean, it is that whole system will have to be thought through, and we'll have the full mind of Anza, FireDancer, and hopefully additional community core contributors like to help think through that problem.
Yeah,
it's definitely one that's going to have to be thought through, shortly with multiple clients.
All right. Well, no other topics to raise. I think we'll call it there. Thank you, everyone. And reminder, next week, Validator Education Workshop. All who are interested, please attend. I'll put an announcement in Discord as well. All right. Thanks.
Thanks, Tim. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks, Paul.